Hi. Can you believe how long it's taken me to read the rest of this borrowers? Oh, you've probably lost interest by now. You'll have to go back and watch the videos straight through without the pauses. We're on chapter 11, and by gosh, I'm going to finish it. Today? Yeah, we can do it today. Okay, chapter 11. Homily was there at the best gate to meet them. She had tidied her hair and smelled of coal tar soap. She looked younger and somehow excited. Well, she kept saying, well, taking the bag from Arrietty and helping Pod to fasten the gate. Well, was it nice? Were you a good girl? Was the cherry tree out? Did the clock strike? She seemed in the dim light to be trying to read the expression on Arrietty's face. Come along now, tea's all ready. Give me your hand. So Arrietty had gone out with her dad, remember, to the garden. So her mom is excited when she gets back to know exactly what it was like. Tea was indeed ready, laid on the round table in the sitting room, with a bright fire burning in the cogwheel. How familiar the room seemed, and Homily, you suddenly, somehow strange. Oh, how familiar the room seemed, and homely, but suddenly, somehow strange. The firelight flickering on the wallpaper, the line which read, "It would be so charming if..." If what? Arrietty always wondered. If our house were less dark, she thought, that would be charming. She looked at the homemade dips, set in upturned drawing pins, which Homily had placed as candle holders among the tea things. The old teapot, a hollow oak apple with its quill spout and wired-on handle, burnished it was now and hard with age. There were 2 roast sliced chestnuts, which they would eat like toast with butter, and a cold boiled chestnut, which Pod would cut like bread. There was a plate of hot dried currants, well plumped before the fire. There were cinnamon breadcrumbs, crispy golden and lightly dredged with sugar, and in front of each place, oh, delight of delights, a single potted shrimp. Homily had put out the silver plates, the florin ones for herself and Arrietty, and the half-crown one for Pod. Come along, Arrietty, if you've washed your hands. Exclaimed Homily, talking to the teapot. Don't dream. Arrietty drew up a cotton spool and sat down slowly. She watched her mother pulling on the spout of the teapot. This was always an interesting moment, the thicker end of the quill being inside the pot. The slight pull just before pouring would draw it tightly into the hole and thus prevent a leak. If, as sometimes happened, a trace of dampness appeared about the join, it only meant a rather harder pull and a sudden gentle twist. I'm not sure I understand how that teapot works. Well, said Homily, gingerly pouring, tell us what you saw. She didn't see so much, said Pod, cutting himself a slice of boiled chestnut to eat with his shrimp. Didn't see the overmantel? No, said Pod, we never went in the morning room. What about the blotting paper? I never got it, said Pod. Now that's a nice thing, began Homily. This is a picture of them with the tea. So Pod is the dad sitting down, Homily's the mom, and Arrietty standing up waiting for her tea. Maybe, said Pod, munching steadily, but I had me feeling I had it bad. What's that? Asked Arrietty. His feeling. Up the back of his head and in his fingers, said Homily. It's a feeling your father gets when there's someone about. Oh, said Arrietty, and seemed to shrink. That's why I brought her along home, said Pod. And was there anyone? Asked Homily anxiously. Pod took a mouthful of shrimp. Must have been, he said, but I didn't see anything. But Arrietty saw the boy, didn't she? Homily leaned across the table. Did you have any feeling, Arrietty? Arrietty started. Oh, do we all have it? Well, not in the same place, said Homily. Mine starts at the back of my ankles and then up my knees. My mother, hers used to start under the chin and run right around her neck. And tied in a bow at the back, said Pod, munching. No, Pod, protested Homily. It's a fact. No need to be sarcastic. All the bell pulls were like that. Like a collar, she said it was. Pity it didn't choke her, said Pod. Now, Pod, be fair. She had her points. Points, said Pod. She was all points. So he didn't like Homily's mother. Would have been his mother-in-law. Arrietty moistened her lips. She glanced nervously from Pod to Homily. I didn't feel anything, she said. Well, said Homily, perhaps it was a false alarm. Oh no, began Arrietty. It wasn't. And as Homily glanced at her sharply, she faltered. I mean, if Papa felt something, perhaps I don't have to. Well, said Homily, you're young. It'll come all in good time. You go and stand in the kitchen, just under the chute, when Mrs. Driver's raking out the stove upstairs. Stand right up on the stool or something so you're fairly near the ceiling. It'll come with practice. After tea, when Pod had gone to his workbench and Homily was washing up, Arrietty rushed to her diary. I'll just open it, she thought, trembling with haste. Anywhere. It fell open at the 9th and 10th of July. Talk of camps, but stay at home. Old Cameron colors of Glasgow Cathedral, 1885. That's what it said for the 9th. And on the 10th, the page was headed, Make hay while the sun shines. Snowdon Peak sold for £5,700 in 1889. Arrietty tore out this last page. Turning it over, she read on the reverse side, July 11th, make not a toil of your pleasure. Niagara passed by C.D. Graham in a cask. 1886. No, she thought, I'll choose the 10th. Make hay while the sun shines. And crossing out her last entry, Mother out of sorts, she wrote below it. Dear Uncle Henry, I hope you are quite well and the cousins are well, and Aunt Loopy, we are very well and I am learning to borrow. Love your niece, Arrietty Clock. Write a letter on the back, please. So she has this diary that she uses for paper, and it was, I believe it was from the big folk upstairs. So she chose a day and tore out the page and wrote a letter to Uncle Henry because the boy said he would take it to him for her. What are you doing, Arrietty? Called Homily from the kitchen. Writing in my diary. Oh, said Homily shortly. Anything you want? Asked Arrietty. It'll do later, said Homily. Arrietty folded the letter and placed it carefully between the pages of Bryce's Tom Thumb Gazette of the World. And in the diary, she wrote, went borrowing, wrote to H, talked to B. After that, Arrietty sat for a long time staring into the fire and thinking and thinking and thinking. Okay, chapter 12.